Hello and welcome to everybody. It is such a pleasure to be here with you today for the Capability Co webinar. We are so thrilled that you could join us. We have an incredible conversation that is about to occur about the future of work. I'm beaming in from you all the way from Sydney, Australia, and that is the Gadigal lands of the Eora Nation. Whenever I start anything like this, and I think we are so really privileged to be able to do this, to acknowledge the land of which we're on, to think about the collective wisdom, the emotional, the intelligent, and the spiritual nature that we have collectively across our land, to draw upon, to contribute to, and also to reimagine what a dignity restoration could look like in this country, to be able to completely harmonise and to respect all cultures, to pay respects to elders past and present, but also to pay homage to all cultures. And I would like to pay that respect right now for us, wherever you are, and also to be able to harmonise across Australia right now. It's so beautiful to be here. I have so much gratitude for this convention together. It's going to be thought-provoking. We are going to be able to solve some crucial problems, but we might also come away with more questions than we have answers. I'm a behavioural facilitator and I'm your moderator today. My name's Suzanne Waldron. And as I've mentioned, our topic is about adaptive capacity. We're going to really draw upon the wisdom of the panelists. We have an amazing lineup for you today. You will also notice that we have Fiona with us and Philip, who you'll meet shortly. Fiona and Philip come from Expression Australia, and they will be helping us with interpreting through Auslan today, so a big welcome to them also. You'll notice that Cvent, the platform that we're using right now, has many different functions for you to get involved in the conversation. You'll notice that there's a Q&A section as well as a chat section, so we're going to get into those in a moment. For those of you that have Q&A capacity and you want to ask as many questions as possible, I'm going to be your voice as much as asking lots of questions myself for the panel. And I wanted to make sure that you also know that if you don't have a question but you really love one of the questions that someone else has asked, then you can actually vote for the questions that you like, and the more you vote, the more they bring them to the top, which is fantastic. We are recording today, and that will be sent out to you afterwards also, so that you'll get some wonderful opportunities to look and to watch and to rewatch and share with your networks also. Now let's get into the chat room. I'd love to see where you're from and what state you're in. Probably not emotionally, but maybe what state or location that you're in. So if we could go into the chat room together right now, you'll notice on the right-hand side, you'll be able to get in there. If we could see where you're from, but also what drew you to be able to be here today. What are you interested in? And what is it that you feel connected to in terms of the future of work? So let's get into the chat room. And whilst that's happening, I'd also like to make sure that we get some introductions to our wonderful panelists as well. So when I was in the pre-brief for this session with the wonderful people from Capability Co, the panelists were described to me as each in their own right, they are pioneers, and they're people that go against the status quo, which is something that I think we need more in this universe right now in our society. Each of the panelists have an amazing background and a backstory, and we're going to get to know about them very soon. So let's have a look in the chat. We have Jane from Queensland. This is a refresher. Fantastic. Gabrielle, you're dialing in from Sydney. It's beautiful that you're helping your clients become adaptive and more rhetoric or beyond rhetoric. Kate, welcome. Rainy Sydney. Yes, you're looking for some inspiration and new thinking. Keep it coming in. Ed, you're in Brighton, Melbourne. Beautiful to have you here. Thanks, Jules. Energy Skills Queensland. It's a peak body for renewable energy sector. Very important conversation you're having right now. So we're looking at credentialing 21st century capabilities into schools. Kate from Brisbane, Duncan from New South Wales, Elizabeth from Adelaide, Melissa in Coffs Harbour. I love this. We've got curiosity, we have ideas, we want to help Next Gen connect. Kerry from Victoria, growth mindset and adaptive capability. Beautiful. Fiona, Anthony, Danny, you're all just going off. This is great. So big welcome to you all. And also looking across the ways in Tasmania with John, which is beautiful, and Martin as well. It's really good to have you all here. Well, let's introduce you to our incredible panelists. They have a lot to say, and I have to say the energy between them in our pre-brief was just electric. So I would love to introduce you to our first person, Finbar O'Hanlon. Now, Finbar is a future thinker, an Imagineer, an inventor, an entrepreneur, and a coach with over 30 years experience in creating and commercializing innovations in the technology, media, and arts sector. As an Imagineer, he helps others understand human capabilities, particularly when they're relating to future thinking, creativity, and innovation. And as an entrepreneur, he has started and run many businesses, one being acquired and listed on the ASX. Now, as a musician, which you probably have picked up from looking at him right now on the screen, he's toured globally and recorded and played with members of bands such as Limp Bizkit and The Cure. I have so many questions about this. He scored music for film and television and released a number of instrumental albums. Finbar, a massive welcome to you. And I would love to know, if I may, what fires you up about this conversation about the future of work?
Well, thanks, Suzanne. It sounds a lot coming from you when you speak about that. But look, I'm really fired up about this conversation because I see around me on this call incredible pioneers, as you mentioned, people with different experiences from different walks of life, all uniting on a positive vision in addressing, to me, one of the greatest challenges facing humankind and the organizations that underpin them, which is the future of work. But it isn't just about the future of work. It's about the future of humanity. The way we work affects our quality of life, our relationships, our ability to pursue our ambitions. And to do that, we need a new perspective, but we need the people who are not afraid, people with capabilities, competencies, people with experience, the frameworks, the systems to help us move through that transition. And look, and I'm thrilled to be on a call with the people that I think can help do that.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you, Finbar. I love your energy. Next up, we have Lizzie Allen. Lizzie is the GM for Right Management and has a great deal of experience in many different fields of sales and marketing, HR, and leadership. She's a strategic partner to organizations in so many different industries and sectors, and focuses on ensuring that the organization and their people achieve their success. I love a success-oriented person, Lizzie. And interestingly, Lizzie holds a postgraduate degree in business information systems from RMIT, and also a Bachelor of Arts graduate from Monash University, majoring in politics and sociology. How interesting. You must be good for a wine conversation over dinner, I reckon. What draws you into this conversation about the future of work?
Oh, thanks, Suzanne, and good morning, everyone. Lovely to be here. For me, the passion is just around changing the conversation. For so long, we've been hung up on the word skills and experience, and it's getting to the core of the real meaning of maximum potential employee. And where my passion really comes in as well is organizational productivity, engagement, employee well-being, really increasing the discretionary effort of an employee when they're in the right role. And ultimately, when you are in a role that you love and you enjoy, you are happier. And the knock on that has to not only your work life, but also life outside of work as well. So that's where, really looking forward to the conversation. So thanks so much for having us, and it's going to be a lot of fun.
Oh, beautiful. Thanks, Lizzie. I love the discretionary effort as well. This is something we're going to unpack a little bit later with you. Thank you. Next, Dr. Marcus Bowles is the co-founder of Capability Co. and chair of the Institute for Working Futures. Marcus leads global thinking, research and efforts to raise workforce capability, reshape leadership and workforce development, and improve the adaptive capacity of employers seeking to respond to the world of work that is yet to be created. That's my favorite part of your bio, Marcus. A big welcome. And considering most of the papers we've read have come from you and from the Institute, and also is really this thinking is based upon your work. Can you bring us up to speed with what fires you up about this conversation?
It's probably not hard to fire me up about this at all. I think my sad life is this is something I've been talking about and doing for 30 years. My PhD originally was in organizational change, and it's just astounded me that we knew things 30 years ago that we still ignore. Things that we keep on going in cycles of rediscovering jobs and skills and And today the mantra is skills-based organisations. But the biggest thing I think about all of that is we look at what we want people to do, not why they do it or what innately they're good at. And so when people don't fit the job, we tell them they're not necessarily good at doing something. And I'd like to change that narrative very much as we spoke. And I think as everyone would understand, this is part of a series of conversations which actually saying, hey, we already know this, let's actually get on and do something. And so the whole idea behind Working Futures doing the research, and now as co-founder, one of the co-founders of Capability Co, which now has taken over and actually absorbed Working Futures, the voice is a single voice really talking about let's just get stuff done.
Beautiful. And so Capability & Co and Institute for Working Futures have come together, and that you are inside that one entity with Capability Co now. Beautiful. What a pleasure for them and for you. Congratulations. What a wonderful step to take. Beautiful. Okay. And Helen, we are going to introduce you now. Helen Anderson is the head of talent for Telstra, and Helen's range of experience spans the future of work and internal first talent initiatives and skill-based organisation strategies, all enabled by validating human capability. She's the architect of Telstra's Future Ready, which includes Future Ready credentials, recognising the human capabilities that develop collaboration, innovation, responsiveness, and our people's adaptive capacity. Seems like you're in the right room too, Helen. Big welcome. What fun about this conversation.
Yeah, thanks, Suzanne, and welcome everyone. Great to be having this conversation today.
So good to have you here. And
Yeah,
tell us more about what brings you here.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Suzanne. And look, I think this is very exciting times we live in. You know, we have this pressure around the exponential rate of change, the emergence of all sorts of technologies, roles, entering the market that didn't exist even 2 weeks ago, and they're entering at volume. So our challenge really is, how do we adapt quickly enough? And what I love about our opportunity as we face into the future of work is it's the opportunity to create a future that's even more human. And not only that, it's our capacity where the human part will be the differentiator for success. How well we harness that as individuals and organisations, that will make the biggest difference. So for me, that's a sweet spot. We have so much opportunity to really mine the latent talent in organisations and in individuals and get a closer alignment for their passions and interests as well.
Beautiful. Wonderful to have you here. I can't wait to tap into your experience and your thinking. Team on the call, I really want to encourage questions as much as possible. So if you want to put them in the chat, if you want to make statements, if you want to add your experiences, I really advocate for that. A lot of you sent through some incredible questions already in the lead up to this webinar, and we've used that as a fundamental way of being able to shape the narrative and the conversation of this call. So if you could continue to put questions in the chat or into the Q&A, I will be looking in there regularly and bringing your point of view across. And if anybody wants to jump on to actually ask a question, we'll be doing that throughout as well. All right, so in our pre-brief, I have to tell you, there's something that Marcus said that stuck with me so deeply that is really framing a lot of the direction of which we're taking. And he said to us, it would be great to talk about what is possible rather than just going on about what the problem is. And you kind of alluded to that, Marcus, when you talked about, we've been talking about this all the time, like we just need to get on with something. And you said direction is important, it's not just about a single solution. And it was one of those moments where I just went, oh, that's insightful. So Marcus, can I start with you, and then we're going to get into a beautiful organic conversation together. Ironically, I do want to know, though, what problem are we actually trying to solve here in this conversation?
Yeah, that's a really great starting point. I think the big thing is that people are solving the wrong problem. And so they're looking at, without trying to avoid the answer to that, the real problem that we're trying to solve is the fact that we actually have people with capacity and potential in the future that we ignore. And we try to make them fit job roles that A, they're not suited to, but B, the organisation really ultimately doesn't need filled by them. They need them, more importantly, somewhere else. And as a priority where we've got shortages, we are trying to put people through very long, elaborate educational processes, whereas we actually focused on the fundamentals of what they're good at and then actually gave them a very short package of technical skills. They'd actually be able to fill that role very competently and actually build a career in the future. So a lot of people that aren't in the workforce and a lot of people that are in the workforce in the wrong roles, in actual fact, would be much better off deployed elsewhere. So in many ways, a lot of things we do in education and human resources and when we're trying to build performance in organisations are actually focused on the wrong problem. They're focused on discrete ideas that if we make someone able to have certain competencies and skills, they'll perform well. But that doesn't describe their full potential, and it doesn't describe to the organisation where they can go that's beyond that role, beyond where they need to be deployed. And so a lot of the real things that I'm really fighting against is that we spend enormous amounts of effort and technology and investment accelerating and making better very poor processes that actually make the organisation less viable, make the organisation less able to adapt and change to the future, and less able to engage people meaningfully on the journey and their purpose.
Now, I want to tap into this a little bit as we go along as well about the impact of that. But can you give us an idea of how is that playing out for us as humans, but also society and in the workplace? Like, what are some real issues that is causing?
Yeah, I mean, I'm only one voice with both research opinion and obviously the evidence of practice. But the key thing is that the idea that's running around at the moment is we can't predict where jobs are going in the future. So we need all this AI behind us to then accelerate and deal with all of these skills dictionaries and these training programs that we've got to try and sort it. That's great, but it's based on old paradigms. It's based on the idea that the concept is skill and job. What we actually have realised is that jobs are really just clusters of capability. And if you understand what the capabilities are, we know that in the future, over 60% of the profiles for jobs are going to be based on human aspects because technology is taking over a lot of the roles which in actual fact can be automated, where humans in actual fact have error rates that are higher than the technology, or most importantly, and this will be ironic for a lot of people, but also not unexpected, where technology is actually creating roles that humans fill and they're in such shortage and the people filling them are so unreliable and so expensive and performing at such a low rate and the productivity so low. They're actually the first ones we want to automate and use the AI and the technology to replace. So in many ways, what we're doing is creating a self-consuming machine where we're replacing the things humans are poor at, but actually ignoring the fact that humans are really good at things that technology is not good at.
Yeah.
And that's been a mantra across time. I think, Finbar, you'd be somebody who could talk to that better than probably I could.
Let's just go across. Yeah, please do.
No, I was just going to say, with the advancement of technology and AI, it was not so long ago that people discovered this thing called ChatGPT 3.5, and then 4 came out. And every time there's an advancement in technology, the demand, there's new evolutions happen in the market. So the market evolves with every step change. So it doesn't matter what comes out, people then want to start to push it further and further and further. And the gap between the market evolution and the value creating to the market there's this big segment. It just gets further and further apart. And if we're not addressing how we can work better and within that sort of a paradigm, we seem to be putting all our energy into the technology space, but not really focusing on exposing and bringing out these capabilities and nurturing and nourishing them so they can work in harmony with each other. So technology is going up, but it seems like the human part of it's just not.
And where are we headed then as a human race, Finbar? And what does it have to do with work? Big question.
Well, look, I think as a human race, we're on a continuous journey of progress, development, and evolution. Yet, when it comes to work, it seems to be the opposite of that. It seems to be that work's being restricted to working in really limited and sort of rigid structures, and those rigid structures are there for a reason, right? So repeatable productivity, and then it's easily measured through the repetition of tasks. But I think that where the human race is going, and the world is, as I say, it's changing faster than ever before. But I think what we need to do is we need to adapt, and we need to, as a human race, we need to start to understand what are the things that we do that machines can't do. I believe that we need to do a human OS upgrade. We upgrade our phones, we upgrade our computers, but we often fight upgrading ourselves. It's like we have these cognitive biases and systems and processes in place, and we seem to be hanging on to those, and yet watching this technology evolve. So I think as a human race, we're going to, whether it's by force or by desire, we're going to start to really look at more what's human, what are our capabilities, how do we restructure this machine, how do we evolve and work in this world? So I just think that this concept of a human OS upgrade is a really important sort of analogy for us to start thinking about everything that surrounds what it is being human, and the way we work and the way we interact, and how do we uncover these things that machines can't do as a core premise.
Beautiful. Helen, you and Lizzie as well, but we'll just start with Helen. What does adaptive mean to you in this context? Because you work with a lot of
it's a great conversation, and I do love it. And thanks, Marcus and Finbar. I'm sitting here going, wow, yes. What I love is that so many companies initially go, data, AI, digitization, we need more of those skills. But what fascinates me is we actually don't need to go source talent with those skills. We need to source talent with the human capabilities like innovation and collaboration to engage us in those technologies in a way that makes the world more human, that we can serve a customer better. And what I love is that companies that have scaled AI across their business and achieved meaningful value from their investments, they dedicate 10% of their commitment to the AI and the algorithms, but the rest to the embedding and changing process to support the effectiveness of those delivering value to their organisation. And so I think more than ever what we see, if we want a world where we take the advantages that these great technologies can offer us, we need to lean into the key to unlock that, and the differentiator is the human capabilities that will do that best.
Beautiful. And Lizzie, from your perspective,
it's a fascinating conversation for me. And just thinking about AI and the tech space, it's quite scary for a lot of people. And when I think about adaptive, for me, it's that adaptive growth mindset that leaders as well as individuals need to really start thinking about, to how you can actually act as an enabler. Because it can be people can try to control it, they can try to block it. But if you actually think about that growth mindset, with that, there'll be obstacles, of course, there will be challenges. But if you're able to bring in that growth mindset, you'll be able to innovate, build new ways of doing things. Because if you try to control something, we've all been there. You spin your wheels, you try to block, you try to say, no, it can't be done. But if you embrace it, the relief that you get, because if you hang on to it and try to control, you're just ultimately going to burn yourself out.
Yeah, beautifully said. Marcus, I know the other day you said that we need to adapt to the changes in our world experiences rather than try to control the change. So what do we need within us to be able to do that?
Yeah, again, talking about real examples, I guess, and landing it is, we walked into a client that had spent $17 million over 3 years on reskilling everybody in delivering their new values and their purpose and their function. And it was both public and a private. So it's a really strange organisation in the sense that it had a government remit, but also a commercial remit. And when we went in there, you looked at what hadn't changed, and what hadn't changed were any of the mindsets. So the things that actually give a person a disposition to want to do something. And the fundamental reason for that is everyone goes, we're going to skill someone for jobs and we're going to churn them, they're going to be better in performing. Our performance systems will pick up whether they're doing it or not. And the biggest issue was, why are we here? How are we engaging with them, and what do we want them to do? And so if you want an organisation to adapt quickly, then people need to understand and be engaged in that journey of that organisation. That doesn't happen through skills. It happens through someone actually having a cognitive belief and a reason to want to do that. We're not going to get everyone on the journey, but if you try to, for instance, use change process training to get someone to change, then you're missing the point. It's like, I don't think anyone after the last 30 years in my life of looking at change management realizes or doesn't expect that training someone to do change without changing the culture and changing their engagement with that purpose will actually get the change that you desire. So the most important thing is that you've got to engage people right from school level with understanding change starts with you. You need to understand how you're going to challenge, have the courage, how you're going to learn. And all of these things are actually human and very strong and innate to some people, and others need to know they're weak in them. And in the future workforce, you're going to be highly employable if you're the first, and you need to do something about it if you're the second. So if you've got a very fixed, resistant mindset to what you want to do, then in actual fact, we will be filtering you out in the employment and recruiting process, because what we want is people who are actually going to be able to learn, adapt, grow, and do it quickly, because we want those sorts of people to drive the change that we're trying to achieve.
Beautiful. Gabrielle saying, I love that. You can't shift mindsets through change tools and processes. And Teresa, I love your skills. Let it go, people. I love your energy there. Teresa is saying, I had our marketing team take out all the reference to skills development from my MBA program at the University of Nottingham. We didn't strive to generate skills, but to develop a suite of capability in potential leaders. Finbar, why are we stuck on this? We've known this for a while. What's going on?
Look, it's a great question. Look, I've always sort of savoured critical thinking, creativity, adaptive mindsets, innovation. These are all things that I've always been really interested in. And it seems to be that it's never really been recognised as anything that relates to business. It's always like, oh, that's that sort of creative stuff. There's no way to measure that. It's all fluffy. And so I think that, you know, in a lot of ways, we've been sort of educated into a system for a world that no longer exists. And as we're moving into that new world, we're sort of hanging on to this sort of process or this concept of, well, these are the rigid sets of things, these skills that need to happen. So when it comes to critical thinking, it's not important that you critically think. It's important you do your job. Creativity as a system, you don't need to do that. And so I think that to be an adaptive, to have these sort of, to unlock your mind and to be that able to be able to do this sort of stuff, as Marcus said, it's like getting in young and early and changing. It has to change in the culture. We need to sort of put values to these things and start to drive aspiration and identify these things in people. Because if we push them out and say they're not relevant, it's very hard for us to go, well, this is what we need to do now. Let's just go and do it. And so I just think there needs to be some nurturing and some value attached to these things. That, you know, look at me. I'm sort of a crazy creative guy that works in the corporate world, but it's this mindset of you know, I'm trying to encourage other creatives and other artists who can think differently and associate new ways, discovering in new things. For me, discovery skills, I did a post recently about the difference between delivery and discovery skills. And it seems like our leadership is very good at delivery skills because it's all about being measured on your delivery. But the ability to discover, to find the problems behind the problems, to find the cracks between the cracks, to associate and put things in new ways, they just haven't had any core value. But I think this is why I'm really passionate about conversations like this and working with these incredible people that are on this call, is because we are all aligned in pushing this narrative. And I think it is starting to get some traction.
Helen, I know that you're human. I am assuming this, but I'm assuming you're human. And as a human inside a very big organization, how do you play the difference between that we want to be creative and we want to be in a growth mindset, and at the same time seems that the entire world loves processes, profits and all the other things. How do you marry those, and how do you sort of edge forward outside of the status quo a little bit inside an organization?
Yeah, fantastic question, Susan. And I think we're always playing against those two tensions within organisations, because by their nature, large organisations like Telstra particularly, you know, we need some structure, we need some process, obviously. But the great news here is that, you know, when I was listening to Finbar and Marcus then, you know, it really reminded me of how many companies have gone and adopted agile ways of working. But it's like and agile is intended to support this mindset shift. And when we come to an agile way of working with the right mindset, this becomes embedded in the culture of the organisation. But what fascinates me in my observations is that many organisations went agile with the old mindset. So rather than actually get the advantage of agile ways of working, what we've got is a lot more complexity in these systems, and in some ways more difficulty for individuals. And yet, you know, part of this is it's not an either or, it's a both. How do we help people transition through? Because if I've been rewarded and educated for my fixed mindset, for my knowledge, for what I know, and get my gold star in the annual performance review for delivery and those sorts of things, it's counterintuitive to me as an individual. So there's a few things that I think we can do, and that's to really amplify and validate human capability. And certainly at Telstra, we've had a significant push on that with our Future Ready program, which absolutely validates people for the humanness that they bring to their work every day. And I have one small anecdote from one of my team members. She'd come from a very process-driven area, and she arrived into my area, which is more conceptual, and we've got to work through how we make this happen for the organisation and shift these mindsets. And literally for 2 months, she was frozen. And she said, but I'm not achieving anything. I'm not getting anything done. My propensity, my bias to action is not being met. It's like, it's okay. Let's have a look at what human capabilities you're bringing that are going to make the difference for this role. And about a month later, she understood it. And it's like this opening where she went, I never realised I was valuable to this place for who I am. And for me, that's the secret sauce. I think we really need to get to a place where we can acknowledge people and let them know that it will be safe for them to feel acknowledged for being human as well.
And I love this distinction between the process, a new process with the old mindset is gold. And then the education part as well. John Corley's asked a really good question here, I think that fits in beautifully, which is how do you make adaptive a cumbersome education system which is based on knowledge and skills in qualification recognition? And maybe Marcus, you could talk about this, because we are really programmed and conditioned, aren't we? And we're battling a long form conditioning, I believe anyway, in society. How do we crack that code a bit?
Yeah, I think I could say some trite things which are really the echoes of people who are really focusing on deepening the understanding of the problem rather than solutions, like qualifications no longer matter in most of the fast growth areas of employment, and things such as the fact that we've got cross-disciplinary knowledge now that no one profession or discipline area owns, and we've got an education system really focusing on 8 streams of disciplines that all the knowledge has to squeeze into, and if it doesn't fit in to one of those areas, then it doesn't fit in. And everyone my wife's a teacher. Oh my God, poor teachers. She's trying to give an individualized, personalized regard, which she's supposed to do, while cramming knowledge into a curriculum that is so bloated, it's impossible to cover everything in the time that she has. And as an artist, what she does, because her background is also in art, is she tries to create events where slow learners who can't fit in that swimming lane start to do things that actually deliver the outcomes, but in a cross-disciplinary way. So I think the whole thing what I'm trying to get to, if we're looking at solutions, is we need to understand that most of the roles that we're creating, particularly because of the technology that we are introducing to work, will no longer sit in a vertical swimming lane, a discipline or a profession or a job family or an occupation, and everything the government funds still fits in those models. So until we change and incentivize education to move to other areas, it's such a difficult balancing act, because I know, because I analyze the future work, that when we talk STEM, absolutely we need those science, technology, engineering, mathematical skills for a lot of the roles. But let's face it, in areas of particular stress where there is people who are not finding work, where they could be working from home and staying in those regions and getting high quality jobs somewhere else, they're going to be in those fast growth digital and data areas, in areas where it's going to be about new environmental and sustainability, about home care, and it's going to be about technology. Those things actually aren't being serviced at all by the existing curriculum. So how do we get a curriculum that's only really delivering at best 20% of the students to a further education and a career, to actually balance the idea that all the fast growth areas may not be in those areas at all? So it's a fundamental change of how we look at government and how we fund education.
Just a small task ahead of us. Lizzie, I'd love to hear what you're thinking, because you're nodding away there. Tell me what your thoughts are.
Oh, look, it's really interesting, and Marcus could not echo enough around the changes I think that are required in the education system, and it needs to happen. The old Morrissey test that they do in year 10 to be, identifying strengths, within school children, is only going but part of the way. And it is how we are able to embrace and understand the way that those gorgeous brains think at such a young age, before they get socialized, before their parents get at them and say, well, this is what I did, and so therefore this is what you need to do. So it's really tapping into the interest of the child. And it's funny, in my career, when I was working as a career transition coach and supporting individuals whose roles had been impacted by organisational change, and people would be sitting there and we'd be doing assessments with them and we'd be discussing their interests and their motivators. So we'd be tapping into what actually makes them tip and what actually brings them joy. And one of the things I'd say to people is, what did you do as a young child? So talk to me about what your ideal weekend was as a child, and you get into how that individual, basically what their creative mindset was, or alternatively what their analytical mindset was. And when you overlay that with capability, it's amazing how much interests, motivation come out when you do actually start talking about capability. And that's something that we need to engender into the schools, engender into parents as well, because it is the parents that have a lot of the influence, as well as obviously teachers and schools. But it's a really, really interesting topic, and one that I think really needs to rise to the fore.
Beautiful, Lizzie. I love what you just said about that, because it's so important to just help people realize what does work for them, and then how they can access it themselves, and then move into this space that's right for them. And I'll use right, of course, because you're from Right Management. It's beautiful. Now we have a wonderful question from Anthony Tran. Anthony, I'd love if you would to come on the screen with us. You just need to raise your hand if you can in the system, and that allows us to then bring you onto the screen. But Anthony has asked a really good question, and I would just like to hear it from your lips, if we may. Welcome, Anthony. Tell us where you're from, and then if you could just ask us that question, we would get into it. And we'll just unmute you and take your camera if possible as well. That'd be wonderful.
There we go.
Hello, and welcome onto the panel.
Thank you. So I guess my question's a bit more around the practicalities of things, because it's really big motherhood statements here that I'm hearing, which is absolutely in belief of. But for an organization that has got those tensions from a short, medium, long term in a really complicated and complex environment in different ways, what I do see across some of our clients, as well as our organization and across the industry, is people triaging the problem that they're trying to solve in a really linear fashion. So it's step 1 to step 2 to step 3, which then never really solves the core of the problem. And they're not really thinking about the whole system and all the interdependencies to reinforce those mechanisms to make the change sustainable or successful in the longer term. And there are various reasons for that outcome. In my mind, I always connect the systems-based thinking to creating space for people to have the agility and capacity to adapt and move things. And we need that at scale within organizations rather than just at an individual level. I also have, I guess, the other side of my thinking is some people just won't survive within organizations or environments because they don't have the willingness to kind of adapt. And that's also okay as well. I don't think it's going to be for everyone, and there's different places for them. The AI stuff is really interesting and will change things, but I think we need people to have that capacity to think about the interdependencies and the complications within their environment as well, and make that call. What are some of your suggestions to bring that within an organizational context, not just from a leadership perspective, but from a team member perspective as well?
Beautiful. Thanks, Anthony. Lovely to have you here. Open question. Let's go.
I'm happy to have throw a few ideas here into this one, Anthony, because Telstra is a large, complex organisation, and they're the challenges we face every day. What I've found really interesting recently, as we've amplified the requirement and the access for people to develop their human capabilities through quite structured systems and processes, that when we introduce, we have quite, structured ways of doing strategic planning and alignment. So that's great. And we need that. I think we've got to get the balance between the internal systems of the organisation. But then, to your point, we need enough agility and dynamism that we can move with these changes. And that's where I think capabilities like being able to think and look across the whole system, but collaborate as well. It's like the correlation between those two is so strong. So how do we help people rather than say, okay, I see my quarterly goals and objectives, and I'm very vertical here, doing my best, and I want my gold star at the end of the year. But actually, no, I'm doing my best here, but who interacts with me? Who else does what I deliver impact? Which other parts of my business do I need to be aware of and familiar with? And for me, the key enabler of that is collaboration. Now, it's both having the capacity to look across the whole system and see myself as part of that. I'm starting to call them constellations because there's so little structure in them sometimes. And also recognizing, the enabler for me to do this better and create the value in this organization that I want to is collaboration. Now, I think this is craft. It's not simple, obviously, because if it was simple, we would have fixed it by now.
Yeah, nice one, Helen. Finbar, I'm interested in what's ticking over in your mind, and then Marcus, because I can see you were going to go next there. Finbar?
Yeah, well, great question, Anthony. I represent probably the world's most recognized innovation institute out of America called GINI, Global Innovation Institute. And we're in 40 countries, over 10,000 certified innovators. We run processes around discovery, systems thinking, design thinking, lateral thinking, critical thinking, all in frameworks. And those frameworks help organizations detect the problem behind the problem, validate it through, through markets, users, business, and technology, 4 different quadrants. And then once we've actually designed a problem, figured out the problem behind the problem, it's taking everyone on that journey using creativity systems, Scamper, some of these different methodologies around replacing, substituting, journey mapping, and some of these applied techniques, which are very interactive and a lot of fun for a lot of the users. It teaches them how to look at their organization through individual components, or even their daily life through individual components, identify the core parts where they want to start improving, and then applying methodologies to that. I think when you look at it in a macro, it can become so overwhelming. But when you do have a set of innovation or creativity systems that can be put in place, especially through applied creativity, front end, mid zone, and back end of innovation, and understanding the roles that sit in those 3 zones, then you can actually start to unlock that stuff. Because if just like creativity, it's the creation of solutions to problems via the reorganization of existing things. You've got to break something down into its components and map them out before you can start to reorganize it. So at least for me, I work with organizations that are 10,000 employees doing multi-billion-dollar contracts with thousands of contracts, government departments, and setting up an enterprise innovation structure from the top down and a tactical innovation structure from the bottom up. So I just don't think there's a lot of people know about these methods and systems and processes. And a lot of those processes are actually written into the human capability standards that Capco sort of deliver. So, I think that they're in place. There are ways to do this. It's just that people look at just systems thinking or just design thinking, and that really starts in the front end of innovation. So at least that's what I think.
Nice. Marcus, we try to simplify things too much, don't we? But it's not as simple as that. How do we tackle these complexities with actionable? So, like, I love Anthony's, it's pretty conceptual. How do we get into this practical space? How do we?
Yeah, I mean, Anthony's. You could pick 5 or 6 different things that are a microcosm of why we need more, cognitive and human engagement to solve things. And Anthony's pick one of them. And so one of the biggest things is that we think because we actually can get people to solve problems and we give them problem-solving training, or we do whatever they're doing, there's 2 things that are just echoes across the board on everything I'm doing at the moment that Anthony's picked up on. The first one is, here's a problem, I applied all the solutions to it, it works, that's the best option, let's implement it, and they roll it out. And someone next to them in another area goes, oh my God, you just cost us $15 million because you've just solved a problem that actually ruins our CX strategy. Or they go, right, we've got the solution, we're rolling it out and we're moving forward. Oh, this bit isn't working. Who's accountable for fixing it? Who's sharing the lessons? How are we actually amplifying our understanding across the whole organization? So what's happened is, unless you change your mindsets to understand that we move together as an organization for a purpose, everyone solves a problem in their doorstep and doesn't care about the consequences or see beyond their own doorstep. And that is the worst thing you can do. It reduces the vibe. I'm systems serious, so academic systems serious, excuse me for saying this. So we're reducing the viability of the whole organization. The less we draw on what people can know is common sense and what we need to do. And every time we make that sort of decision, we add complexity to the whole system. So from every point of view, what you're saying, Anthony, and what you're describing is we have to solve those things to actually get capability uplift in organisations. And that's why human capabilities and the 30 years of research and refining them, it gives some of the way to decode that. So there's areas that we call head, hand and heart. We have to change how we think, we have to change what we do, or we have to actually get people to engage in this differently. And so if you're trying to teach problem solving as how you do it without understanding that it has a component of critical thinking or of empathy, then in actual fact, you don't actually start to roll it out and change what people's practices are. You just change the solution to something that is actually very short term.
Beautiful. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Anthony, for joining us. We really appreciate your addition to the conversation. Also want to quickly say well done and amazing things to Philip and Fiona, who are just swapping between each other and doing a great job on the signing front. So thank you. Helen, I know you have to leave us soon, so I just want to make sure we tap into your brain as much as possible. When I'm assuming this, but when you get lost in the complexity of all of this, what's the place where you come back to in yourself as a leader? When things feel too complex and systems thinking and creativity and then productivity and process and all the things just start to overwhelm, do you have like a mantra for yourself or a place you come back to remind you where to start again or where to take back off from?
Yeah, that's a great question. I feel like we, well, certainly what I do is I come back to this moment and go, okay, we know that there's that kind of approach that says we overestimate what we can achieve in a year and underestimate what we can achieve in 3 years from a term in terms of when we're developing strategy. And I think that's that kind of mindset that I take on. It's like, okay, well, what really is at risk here? What's the concern? What is it that is within my locus of control right here, right now? And what's the small incremental decision I can make that keeps the momentum happening in the moment, but maybe is an unknown? Because, some of the comments there in the chat, I think are absolutely right. We've got to test and learn, and we need to allow that we will make mistakes. And so I'm increasingly, for my team particularly, including a language that says, we're going to try this and see what happens. Now, in corporations, we still get some handrails around that. But at the same time, I educate and communicate with my stakeholders that because it's an unknown future we're stepping into, where we're testing and learning, that their expectation is also that we will spend some time testing and learning before we come up with solutioning, and that we will retain that principle of adaptability, that if circumstances change, we will shift and change as well. So it is a challenge because people are so conditioned to wanting certainty or wanting clarity. So as much as I can give clarity to the team, I do, even if the clarity is right now things are uncertain.
Yeah, that's it. So let's just adapt to that reality for a start. Lizzie and Finbar, from a character development perspective, how do we need to show up in order to have the courage? I mean, this takes courage because we're trying to steer a new path that has been indoctrinated into us in quite some time. It's really calling. There's a lot of noise. There's a lot of fast-paced change. How do we narrow this to help people listening and watching and thinking about this? What kind of character do we need to develop in order to help us on this road?
Lizzie, do you want to go first?
I was about to say, Finbar, you can go. I'm happy. I'm very happy to go. It's a really, really good question. I think from a character perspective, I'm actually going to take a two-pronged sort of response to this one. From a character perspective, one of the things that I do, and when I look at leaders and I look at leaders within my organisation and leaders outside of my organisation, is curiosity. So it's the curious leader and it's the curious person that I think really enables change to happen and can enable a lot of this work to also be done. So with that curiosity, but then I think it's also being brave and being bold. And one of the challenges, and this is kind of like the other sort of part of the response as well, is a lot of individuals can get very, very, very daunted by what they believe is going to just be almost too big a task. And this is where I'm thinking part of what Helen was touching on as well is kind of where do you start? And so many organizations look at it and go, it's all consuming, it's all encompassing. How do I do this across enterprise? And then you've got your stakeholders saying, well, how much is this going to cost? What's the return on investment? What are we actually going to be getting out of this? And where do we actually move to from there? So for me, a lot of the advice and consulting work that I give to organisations is you have to start somewhere, whether it be with a pilot, whether it be with, a particular business unit, but by creating that that pilot, you create that point of view, you create that impetus for change, and then you create that organisational curiosity. And it's almost, for want of a better word, it's a bit of jealousy. It's kind of like, I want to go and work in Helen's team because Helen's doing all of this and I'm kind of like, locked in my process driven. I get my gold star at the end of the year for doing a good job, and isn't that great? But how do we, as organisations, start to change the language around we're building talent farms, we're building an almost kind of like that pull strategy of come and work for my team, come and work for my business unit because we're doing different stuff. And when you start doing that, that's when you create that cultural change, which we know can take a very, very, very long time. But all of those characteristics of, being curious, wanting to learn and wanting to actually adapt, that is where I would certainly see that, character and that mindset shift change that needs to occur.
Yeah, thank you so much, Finbar.
Yeah. So look, it's a couple of things. I think that from an individual character level, I totally agree with Lizzie in the curiosity. I think also from a character, you need. It's really great to be a good questioner and to have a higher question to answer ratio. You see, most solutions, when you can actually be very good at questioning and get that discovery part of it, you can actually, the outcomes will actually give you the solution, rather than often we work on trying to figure out what the solution is rather than trying to figure out what the questions are. And so being a good questioner for me is a really, really important trait. And part of that is being able to be a language translator. And so, for example, if you're in an organization and you need to be talking to a board about an innovation program, it's not about to be able to change it to being about managing risk, talking to the board saying, what top 3 companies might disrupt us in the next 90 days? And when they can't answer, saying, how's that managing risk? And so it's about us being able to look forward and look backward and being able to sort of change the conversation to take the word innovation out of it and then put it through a risk mitigation process. So being able to look at everything in its macro in a multifaceted lens, whereby when we're sort of experimenting, the experimenting isn't just we're trying things, it's about us getting closer to our goal or being able to shift that language. So language translation and being able to sort of speak through different languages to different people in the organization to get their buy-in is actually a critical skill in my view. And that's that design thinking sort of applied process. So, and then obviously culture, the character can only live in the right culture. So it's, if you're a leader, you can develop that culture. And if you're not, you want to be in a culture that allows you to develop that character.
Okay, so the chat's going off between Lizzie and Finbar's answers here, by the way. So Ed says Finn has nailed it. We also have Jules. I'd really love Jules to come on if possible. If you feel like it, Jules, raise your hand and we'll come and talk about neurodiversity and neurotypes around covering blind spots to get true transformational collaboration. I'd love to chat to you about that, but if not, we can say if you come on, that would be wonderful. If you want to, just raise your hand. Also, we want to look at understanding everyone doesn't see the world the same way that we do, which is fab. Jules, welcome. I'll be with you in a second. And Melissa is saying building curiosity relies on insight, reflection, learning from failure, as Micah said, and competition, as Lizzie describes, teaching, questioning, Bimba. Nice summary. Thanks, Melissa. And also another Finn nailed it, limited worldviews. Welcome, Jules. Let's talk about neurotypes if we can. I'll get you off mute and on the camera if we are possibly able to. Tell us more about what you're thinking, and I'd love a question from you too. By the way, thanks for doing all the chat and the questions, everyone. This is really beautiful to have you all providing insights. Just while Jules is getting settled in with the mute button and the camera, I'm going to ask the panel from John, how do leaders include metrics and KPIs for human capabilities? Let's just talk about that for a second, and then we'll come back to Jules.
Or maybe because of Helen's limited time, I'd love to answer it. But I guess, Helen, in terms of you've done it and had to do it at Telstra, and we were obviously partnering with that. But yeah, how do you get metrics that are meaningful, that aren't just about process outcomes and performance outcomes?
Yeah, thanks, Marcus. And Marcus and I have partnered on a significant piece of work here at Telstra, which is Future Ready. And through that, we developed a psychometric instrument that measures the human capabilities and people's predictive potential to really demonstrate these capabilities. Once team members at Telstra complete that questionnaire, we have some rich data that can help inform some decisions for us around who is showing the potential to demonstrate that capability. And then we can put in place the learning, development, and even get that credentialed against university credit. So you're really making the human capabilities have a value in this system that sometimes, the education system, that doesn't serve us the way we want. So from that perspective, I think we have a very clear way to develop and notice leaders who have more potential or less, or certainly to then direct the capability development that they need. What we're able to see sometimes is that there may be more junior team members with the potential to really demonstrate these human capabilities. And so what that allows us to do then is to focus on those people to kind of find that latent talent and mine the gold in our own back garden. Equally, where we see leaders who perhaps aren't showing so much of the development of the human capability, but certainly showing the potential, using that data from these kinds of instruments in our Future Ready approach, we can then go and zero in and help and support them to develop that capability further. So it is possible. It's not simple. It's not easy. And it's yet again, another one of those things where we have to take the organisation on a journey and transform the mindset so that people don't take it personally, that this is a measure that they're going to be judged on, because our old systems have done that all the time. But actually what we're wanting them to see is that the human capability has a value in this organisation. And the more they're able to demonstrate it, the more valuable they are across a whole range of skills within the organisation.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you so much, Helen. Marcus, did you have an addition to that as well?
Yeah, I think and obviously there's screedy things on metrics and all the rest of it, because you can't sell a consultancy product or anything to any corporation unless you can show a bottom line. I think the starting point is to realise there's some really big macro measures. The first one is human capital value. We used to measure human capital value, and I say used to, most still do, but we shouldn't, on the productive output of somebody in a job. We're paying you for this, you need to do this. Transactional, really simple process. We build all of our HR systems based on this transaction. It doesn't deliver change, it doesn't deliver transformation. But the bit that does is when you look at the person and their potential beyond that role and what they've got, because we know that 60% of future roles are going to be human. So if we can look inside the person and see what they've got in the human, we can start to see where they can scale across multiple futures, where people like Lizzie's team in right management and others can then start to move them from where they are to real opportunities, or inside us in organisation, start to find out all this latent potential that if you spend a little bit of time developing it, suddenly fills all of these gaps where you were thinking it was going to be really expensive to find people. But because they've got the human capabilities, because they can learn quickly, because they can adapt, because they can do certain things, they can then move to fill those areas. Doubling the human resource value, if you look at the human capital value by saying, this is what they can do now, this is what we can do in the future, and look at it as an organisation. What organisation that's listed would go, oh, we really don't want to know how we can double the value of our workforce?
Yeah. Beautifully said. Thank you, Marcus. Jules, it's good to have you on the call with us. Thank you for joining the panel. Welcome.
I'm having some tech difficulties, so I don't know if you can actually hear me or not.
Yep.
Can you hear me?
You're clear as day. It's wonderful
Awesome.
to see you.
Thank
and to
you.
hear you.
Yeah.
I'm going to combine a couple of things here. So, Jules, tell us more about the neurotypes and neurodiversity that you spoke about, and also I'd love to hear a question to the panel. But then I'm going to come back to Melissa's comment also in the chat.
We've just started working with Neuropower in understanding that there's 8 different types of adult brains, and that there's 9 different types of child brains, and they've MRI'd 30,000 brains. And actually it's the science behind how brains work and understanding that there are all those different types of brains, and that people, you know, who have had trauma backgrounds might have underdeveloped prefrontal cortexes. And they just talk about how whilst we need the energy of that limbic system, that's your original system that would help you in that flight or fright situation and save you if you're being chased by a tiger, that a lot of us live in that really space that is difficult to measure. Sorry, I'm really nervous. Can you tell how?
It's okay, it's all right. We're here with you. Yep.
I don't really like public speaking, but and this is exactly what it's about: being able to understand that I'm an adult. I've had these human experiences. I've been raised in remote or regional Queensland, so I've got a very limited worldview in how. So I've got to get out there and I've got to understand these things about myself and understand that I have got blind spots. And so to get true transformational collaboration, it's about bringing in those different neurotypes that can cover my blind spots, because I know I'm low at seeing the facts. So I need to pick up people who are high in seeing the facts. I know what my talents and abilities are, and being able to recognize other people's talents and abilities, and being able to see that and understand that people just don't see the world the same way you do. And they also, if you look at people, Kogan's theory of adult development and things like that, understanding 70% of people won't get past the cultural maturity level number 3 because of their experiences. So being able to be vulnerable enough to understand that about ourselves, and that's where the true work is understanding humans. Yeah.
Yes, Jules. Firstly, I want to say you have done in action what we're talking about. So massive congratulations, because you've come on, you know, not necessarily wanting to do that, asking good questions, making points that you're learning about in the moment, and there's nothing better than role modeling in action. So thank you for being an amazing leader on our call. I appreciate you. Open to the panel, can we talk about what Jules is talking about? We're going to keep it slightly short because I want to go somewhere else before we get to the wrap up. But how can we harness diversity in this way and neurotypes?
Yeah, I think all of us could comment on it, but from my point of view, the whole reason for the human capabilities is so that we don't get locked into ideas about inclusion and diversity and biases built on competencies and skills that came from the industrial age in the last century. And if you're looking, for instance, at AI, churning through all of the data, what they still see is all the churn of the biased information that was in the past. And I learned very early when I was at university in Melbourne University, and I had a lecturer who in actual fact talked about mind mix and innovation and creativity. And the thing that he was talking about then was neurodiversity, but he didn't know it. And what he was saying, and what we've always encouraged, particularly when we're working with schools, is that and what you're describing is very sophisticated in the neuropower and the way they look at it, is that the more you can diverse ideas and diverse perspectives looking at a problem in an experiment, the better the solution will be, irrespective of how you conduct it or what you're trying to do. Because the idea that there's one solution to everything that we're going to encounter, but the most important thing is we learn to listen to what Finn was talking about, multiple questions and different perspectives before we start to land on what we think is the answer.
Beautiful. And Finn, I would imagine that there's quite a big element of us that we have to ride kind of two things in parallel. There's doing things, because we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater in terms of, you know, let's just all be completely creative and go into this diversity of thinking and, you know, and we become chaotic. We still need to have to deliver on certain things. How do you suggest that we integrate this?
Well, first off, I just got to say, what you've just said about the creativity and the chaotic and all that is part of why I exist, is to tell people it's actually not about that. So creativity isn't chaos, right? It's using creativity in the right way, the structured processes around creativity and how to use that. We just don't know. So we just start randomly doing things and we call that creativity, and that's chaos. But that's actually not what creativity is. And so, but when you put a system around things like creativity, and when you've got this stuff, the reason when I first heard what Marcus was doing and got involved in this is my whole life I've been someone that's been different. And I work with all different people, from artists to music to technology. And Jules, by the way, you nailed it. You were awesome. So kudos to you, right? But, you know, this ability to everyone is important, and being able to sort of surface that stuff and put, at least the way I look at it is to try and understand where these values sit, and then have a system where those values can be identified and put together in a way that infuses collaboration, is always something I've been super passionate about. But I'm also super passionate about trying to make sure people understand that creativity and this stuff is not chaos. It can be probably one of the most powerful things you can unlock if you know how to do it. It's just that people they just have a presumption around creativity. So not trying to jump on you, Suzanne. I just want to try and I'm very passionate about this word, because my whole life I've been creative. I've led a fantastic life, and I love to be able to share that with everyone. And to your point, Jules, is your unique makeup is so valuable if someone knows how to use that unique makeup. And so once we start to build this sort of language and the systems that allow that, rather than the chaos, then I think we're just going to be in a much more beautiful and better world. I'm not sure if that answers your question, but...
Vin, you're incredible. I love it. I love the passion, and I love the conviction and the truth that you speak. So beautiful. Thank you. See what you did, Jules? Beautiful, beautiful way of being able to engage us all. So thank you for being with us, Jules. We'll say goodbye to you now, just for a moment. What you just said there, Finn, was wonderful. Is we want to harness our uniqueness. We just need to learn how to use it. And I like the frame of them putting that in a system. So the system of process, the system of creativity, and being able to be consistent as well as creative, and then also follow the natural form of process, because none of this is wrong. None of the things we're talking about is wrong. It's just about how we balance them, how we use them, and then how we be able to look at the way the future of the world is going to be for us in this very new way that we're working. I have a hope that this conversation for everyone listening and watching has given a sense of possibility, a sense of permission almost, if that's the right word, I don't know, but an ability to be able to tap into some places that we need to dare to go, to be courageous to go. And we've seen an incredible display of that today. We've had some beautiful thoughts about this. I'd really like to bring another person onto the panel with us to help us wrap up a little bit. And that is the wonderful Mark Britt, who is the chair of Capability Co. Welcome to the panel, Mark. As we're getting to the pointy end of our conversation, I'd really love to get some insights from you, reflections, some moments that mean something to you about what you've been experiencing in this conversation. Tell us more about what you've been thinking and what you've seen today.
So it's pretty rare that you have the opportunity to sit in a work event and be genuinely moved by a conversation. And what a privilege to sit and listen to a discussion about human potential and how we embrace the unique makeup of us all, how we embrace diversity, talking about courage in seeing the whole human in a world where, my own experience is just massive increasing change, social pressure, and the world of work becoming more complex and harder. And so I have the very easy job of just saying a huge thank you, right? So thank you for driving a wonderful conversation. Finn, Marcus, Lizzie, Helen, who I think has left us, thank you for being our panelists. For anyone who doesn't know, these guys are a combination of partners, ambassadors, and clients of Capability Co. And they are the people that make working at Capability Co. an absolutely unique privilege and a wonderful opportunity. And so last thank you is actually to the team for Capability Co. for bringing this together. This is a huge milestone. It's the highlight of my week anyway, just on a personal level, but it's a huge milestone for us as a very young company in trying to raise the bar in the quality of these sort of conversations and make capability the currency. So we're talking about people as the whole of the human and not the way the traditional sort of HR systems tend to diminish that process. And so this is a huge milestone for us. It's the first. Our hope is that it's the first of many. And that we continue to foster and encourage these sorts of conversations and connect a community of people that share a common passion. And so please give us feedback. Please engage with us. Tell us how we improve this going forward. And just a huge thank you to all the people who do the massive amount of work to bring this together.
Oh, beautifully said. Thank you so much,
Thank you.
Mark. Thank you for making it happen too. Marcus, I'd really like to hear just from you also, if I may, in the wrap up. We've really springboard off a lot of your work, a lot of your research, and I'd really like to know from your perspective, if there's like one, I know you're going to hate this question, but let me do it anyway. What's a thing that you can point people in the direction of that would help them, go from this thinking into an action after this call?
What's one thing? I think it's a provocation. So I think the big thing is take away from this is a conversation where instead of, we're living what we're saying. So we're actually trying to get humans to engage in a human conversation rather than a conversation about a problem someone else owns that you might have or the technology you need to use to do. It's actually about sharing our experiences and actually getting better at understanding that a lot of the things that we're trying to do and trying to solve, there are certain things that we can already solve and do, and we can do it as a whole workforce or as a whole of an education system or as a society. Great motherhood statements and all the rest of it. But all of this is built on action. So we've been doing 30 years of research and also implementing with over 250 capability frameworks with public, private, large, small, Australian, New Zealand, global organisations. And in that, we meet great people. Some of those are on the call right now. But the more that we can actually populate these conversations and start moving forward. So I think that the first thing is, if you don't believe it's right, question whether it is. And then go and talk to people who are doing it now. Start opening up the networks. Everyone on the call who's been on the panel connects with about 10 or 20 people on a weekly basis where they share what they're doing and why they're doing it and receive in return the same feedback. So we know that the things that you hear every day, like skills equals jobs, is absolute BS. When we perpetuate that, then have education systems churning out the same sorts of people that were employed 10 to 20 years ago, and there's an increasing gap of talent in the workforce, then something's awry. And if that means you go, I am challenging why we think this is actually working. And if the government funding doesn't land where it needs to be, build projects and take it to them to show regional employment, young people without jobs, securing talented and getting paid for learning while they're at work in companies that are located somewhere where they're not. That's the workforce of the future. That's the stuff that we're trying to encourage. We're trying to build those pathways. We're trying to get young people, ultimately, and particularly people who feel dislocated from where they don't fit, to actually see that they have merit and there's some inner strengths that they have that are very human and very much able to fit into the world of the future workplace.
Beautiful. Thank you, Marcus. Thank you for doing the work that you do. This does bring us to the end of our conversation. Well, not really. It's the beginning of a conversation, isn't it, really? Finbar and Lizzie and Marcus and Helen, your insights, your expertise, your experience has just been second to none. We're very privileged to be able to have tapped into your brains today. I also want to say thank you to the people who are absolutely annihilating the chat. It's my favourite thing to see. And also the people who are brave to come on to the panel as well and state what it is that they believe and also ask questions. This truly is a conversation. It's not an observation. And so Capability Co, you rock. A few people had put into the chat quite early on, we need help with this and we need to get into this conversation more. And I would like to encourage people to actually connect with Capability Co to have more conversations. So if you've got more questions and ideas to share, you want to dive deeper into these conversations and the concepts that we've discussed, the team really do want to hear from you. It helps develop the conversations for the future, helps them understand where you're at, and also just making sure that we keep transforming the workplace and ultimately humanity in the society in a way that really is conducive to health, conducive to wholesomeness, and adaptive capability is often and obviously the key to this. I hope it's been worth your time, and I'm really grateful to have been able to help lead some of the conversation. Massive thank you to Mel and Dee behind the scenes as well, and everyone else who has worked really hard to make this happen. Another great shout out to Fiona and Philip for being amazing advocates and signers for us today. That's the end of our conversation. You have 2 minutes spare. That means 1 minute now, but don't read your emails in that time. Just breathe, have a moment. It's a free moment. And we hope that you have an amazing rest of your day. Lovely to see you, and we'll see you again next time.